Now, when you started your first job in 1953 with Donovan H. Lee, consulting engineer, capital investment was happening in some parts of the world, but not heavily in England. Just describe some of the jobs you did there, and you had designs in multiple countries, right?
Yes, it was an interesting firm for a number of reasons. It had a payroll of about 12 to 15. We all did everything. I mean, there weren't draftsmen and there weren't people who did quantities and designers, separate identities at all. Every one of us did everything, and it didn't matter whether you were in your middle 20s or your middle 50s, you still
expected to do all the aspects.
You wrote all the letters on the jobs that you were involved in. It was a remarkable experience in this sense. The work, as you identified, was all over the world. We cashed in on the end of empire, I think, in many ways. Australia, New Zealand, Canada, India, the United States, and some of the work was. Very little in Europe, but, and very little in Britain itself, because, as you pointed out, capital investment at that time was at its low. I mean, it was a poor country. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You married Irene in 1954.
Yes.
And, or more probably, Irene married you. We get it right. The women are the ones who make the decisions.
Yes.
You can't win on that. Okay.
No, I'm comfortable in that type of discussion, yes.
The second job with as design and resident engineer for Lindsay County Council from 55 to 57, that gave you both a new setting and different interests and opportunities, right?
Yes, indeed. We moved to a cathedral town in the town of Lincoln, and were fortunate to spend most of our time living there in the cathedral close. So we were able to observe and somewhat participate in the goings on of religious life, or the Church of England, and it was very much like Barchester Towers, Anthony Trollope's book. I don't think it had changed over the 100 years. It was a rare experience, yes.
Now the thought was put in your mind of possible work in Canada. How did that come about?
Well, we shared a house with a Scots lady who was director of music for the county. And she took 3 months leave every year and went to various parts of the world. And she got us very interested in this idea of going to various parts of the world, but we had to start somewhere. And in the end, she puts a very good case for going to Canada, and particularly to British Columbia and Victoria. She was quite right.
I just happen to have in my possession here a reference letter by C.K. Tallick, who was the county surveyor, who was your boss at the time. And you must have fooled him, is all I can say.
Well,
what can we say? During his 21 months in the department, which in view of the limited funds available, speaking to capital investment, in these days, and his transfer from one section to another was all too short to leave his mark. His service was entirely satisfactory, and he showed the knowledge, intelligence, and capacity that would have made his continued employment welcome, and augurs well for his future in a dominion which offers so much more scope nowadays to a young, keen, and qualified civil engineer. And I think that captured a lot of things there, opportunity that others had picked up for Canada. And you moved to Victoria in 1957. Canada was on a roll.
It was on from an engineering point of view, it was on a roll. I mean, we were building a bridge a week.
Just repeat that. You're building
a bridge a week.
Right.
I mean, we were designing. There must have been 30, 40 bridges on the design boards at the time.
Right.
It was done very well, I thought. New ground was being opened up. The north of British Columbia, which had dirt roads on, and often not bridges but fords, were being properly constructed. It was very exciting, and it was exciting to go and become a resident engineer on that construction in the
Now,
north of this.
In the north, you were located in...
Prince George, which was an experience that was somewhat novel to us. We'd never seen a place like that before.
Where English wasn't the first language.
If I'd have spoken Italian or German, I'd have probably been better off in my work. And these people work very hard. This was a great opportunity for them. And
I'm with you.
Yeah.
While you were in Canada, you'd been doing work in structure. You got interested in structural safety, and your first paper, published with a bachelor's degree, Concepts of Structural Safety in the Journal of Structural Division of American Society of Civil Engineers in 1960. And when we were chatting about this work, you thought if you could write that, presumably you could offer something to universities. So,
yes. I didn't understand really the basis of this design work that I was doing after 6 years. I think I was good at doing it and produced, I believe, safe designs, but the true understanding eluded me. So I spent the evenings reading and studying and trying to get my own picture of structural safety, and then wrote this paper, which I sent off to the ASCE. And having done that, I thought, well, I'd like to teach in a university. So I wrote to some very distinguished universities, Caltech and places like that, offering my services, pointing out to them that I was well educated and had practiced, I thought, in a fairly interesting manner.
Right.
And I got very kind letters back, and which essentially stated that to become a professor in a university in North America, one needed a doctorate, and you should consider this as essential as a union card to be a steel worker. And
fair
I mean, this was consistent advice from various parts of the United States, so I didn't ignore it.
There are a few exceptions. I can think of my own academic mentor, Ray Lindsley.
Absolutely brilliant people.
Had a bachelor's degree, and I can think today of David Billington at Princeton with a bachelor's degree.
But these are out so different from me.
Anyhow, now that you had a need for a union card, applications to grad schools, and you ended up applying to other places and ending up the University of Minnesota in 1959.
Yep.
And I think this was a very interesting time for you. Just describe your arrival in the area of Minneapolis-St. Paul.
Well, Irene and I and our two dogs, because I think there was a 6-month hiatus in our life when we hadn't had dogs, but the rest of the time we've had dogs. Emigrated to this country. The port of entry was Port Angeles. I think it was such a rare event that certainly the person on duty had to look up the book for admission of immigrants.
Right.
And then we drove across the northern part of the States to Minneapolis, and we arrived there on the day, within a day of the start of the annual national meeting of the American Union. Richard Nixon was in town as the main speaker, and quite frankly, finding accommodation was going to prove extremely difficult.
Right.
In the first night, a very kindly hotelier put us up in a shed with no ablution facilities. And then we started looking for somewhere to live. And we went to a realtor, and it was clear that nothing was going to happen quickly. But there was a young man there who realized our predicament, and he said, "Please come home and stay with us."
That was wonderful hospitality. You'd have lifetime good feelings about the place.
Yes,
from that.
yes.
Your work at University of Minnesota, you happen to have the good fortune to work with one of the giants of the field, Larry Goodman. And do you have anything you'd like to say about how Larry might have influenced you?
Well, to the extent, let's get this right. To the extent I am a gentleman, he amplified every tendency.
Okay.
Okay? That's what I would say. Yes.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm with you. During your doctoral studies there, you ended up doing 3 papers,
Yes,
publishing
yeah.
3 papers, and the last of them was published in 1963. But one I have a little chortle about is a paper that you published with Larry in the Proceedings of the Royal Society.
Yes.
And in that particular instance, it had to be transmitted by a member. And you'd like to comment on how you managed to get Sir Harold Jeffreys to transmit that for you?
Well, it's like most things in life, there's a lot of luck. Harold Jeffreys spent a summer at Minnesota lecturing on geophysics, and everyone in their right mind who could follow the argument attended.
Right.
And then Goodman went off to Cambridge as a fellow for a year.
So he had connections.
Yes, and he must have, over some arrangement, talked to Jeffreys about this work we'd done, which was about geophysics.
Right.
And he read it and said he would like to transmit it.
Fair enough.
I mean, why argue?
I find it interesting that the work goes to the Royal Society, Journal of Applied Mechanics, and one of them, Journal of Soil Mechanics and Foundation Division of American Society of Civil Engineers, showing the diversity and application of it. It was quite an interesting mix.
It's also rather strange that I was indubitably supported by money to do with aeronautical engineering in some way or other. There was not the same constraints that seem to exist on supporting young people as exist today.
Okay.
And I don't know if that's good or bad, but it's a fact. There's no doubt about that.
I'd like to pick up on something. I never had the privilege of knowing Larry Goodman, but on the occasion of him being nominated for the Newmark Medal of the American Society of Civil Engineers, there was a statement needed, and he was prevailed upon to write some statement about how he saw the world. And his comment about civil engineering: of all the branches of engineering, civil engineering affects the average citizen most closely. It's an extremely broad field, admitting scope for a wide variety of talents. Like any activity deserving the name profession, civil engineering has a theoretical underpinning whose exponents find a natural home in the university community. It is to this basis of civil engineering in applied mechanics that my career has been devoted. He was a splendid mechanician.
Yes, he was a first-rate mechanician.
And something else about the nature of the man. I have tried to inculcate in my own students a sense of the vital importance of adherence to the highest standards of academic freedom and professional responsibility, as well, of course, as a sense of the importance of impeccable scholarship. While I have never shirked speaking up for what I believe to be right, my conscience acquits me of having ever knowingly injured any of my colleagues or failed to support any of my students. That many of them who have moved on to the greater world of professional responsibility continue to consult me is a source of satisfaction. He's clearly a gracious gentleman and was very, very proud of the colleagues he'd worked with.
And he wasn't greedy.
Exactly.
Yes.
He's a gentleman.
Yes.
A scholar gentleman, which we could do with a few more.
Oh, I think there are plenty around.
I think so.
Yeah.